About 200 meters ahead, several scrapped cars were placed horizontally and vertically, completely blocking the road. Behind the barricades were more than a dozen burly men. They held steel pipes, machetes, and even 2 homemade shotguns. The leader was a bald fat man with a face full of flesh, a thick gold necklace around his neck, a toothpick in his mouth, looking invincibly arrogant. "This mountain is mine to plant, and this tree is mine to grow. If you want to pass, leave your money. Everyone in the car get out." "Brother Ryan, we've met a roadhog." Cody rubbed his hands excitedly. "This typical cannon fodder villain doesn't live 3 minutes in anime. Leave it to me." "You save it. They have guns." Ryan pressed Cody's shoulder. "Reasoning with people like this is useless. You have to fight fire with fire." Saying that, he turned his head and shouted at Zoe, who was boredly picking at the ham sausage plastic wrap in the back. "Zoe, someone wants to steal your meat." This sentence was more effective than any pre-war mobilization. Zoe's eyes snapped open. "Grab my meat? You 2-legged beasts dare to steal my meat. This is unbearable." Before the off-road vehicle even stopped, Zoe jumped out directly. She grabbed her hammer with both hands and rushed toward the barricades like a whirlwind. The bald fat man on the opposite side saw a little girl rushing toward him with a hammer. At first he was stunned, and then he burst into laughter. "Brothers, give this little girl a little color." Before the words faded, Zoe rushed to the barricade. Without slowing down at all, she jumped high, and the octagonal hammer in her hand came down like thunder. It hit the front of a scrapped Santana that was blocking the way. A loud noise was deafening. The Santana, weighing more than a ton, was struck by this hammer. The entire rear of the car was smashed. Then it rolled twice in midair and crashed down at the feet of the bald fat man and his gang. The audience was silent. The toothpick in the bald fat man's mouth fell to the ground, and his eyes nearly bulged out. The dozen or so thugs behind him all trembled, unable to even hold their weapons steady. What kind of monster is this? A hammer smashed a car away? Is she a new type of power-type superpower? Zoe stood steadily on the ground, looking at them with no expression, step by step approaching them. The hammerhead rubbed sparks on the asphalt road. She pulled down her mask, revealing her small, sharp tiger teeth, and let out a low growl. "Monster, run, hurry!" The bald fat man was so frightened that his soul nearly left his body. He turned and tried to run, but his fat body moved like a ball. The scene that followed was tragic and very comedic. Zoe didn't need to use her hammer to smash them. That would be too dirty. She directly used the octagonal hammer as a giant fly swatter and started swinging. Bang! Another thug was kicked in the stomach by Zoe and flew 3 meters into the air, landing on a street lamp pole. The bald fat man was so frightened that he turned his head and ran, his fat body bouncing like a ball. Zoe rushed up and grabbed the back of his collar with one hand. Then she used her free other hand to aim at his big bald head. Pop, 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 3 crisp slaps. "Ouch! Auntie, spare my life. I was wrong. I won't do it again." The bald fat man was slapped so hard he saw stars, and a big bump visibly rose on his head. In less than a minute, this group of roadhogs was all taken down. They knelt neatly on the side of the road, holding their heads with both hands, singing Conquest. The convoy drove slowly past. Ryan pressed the window and glanced coldly at them. "Let me see you blocking the road and robbing in the future. It won't be as simple as being beaten. Get out of here." "Yes, yes, Uncle, go slowly, Auntie, go slowly." The bald fat man nodded repeatedly. Zoe carried her hammer, raised her chin arrogantly, and ran back into the car bed. "Master is mighty! Master is domineering! Master has dominated the rivers and lakes for thousands of years!" Cody applauded wildly in the car, almost pulling out a banner. Night fell. The convoy didn't find a suitable building, so they could only camp under an abandoned viaduct. The terrain here was high, the view was wide, and it wasn't easy to be surrounded by zombies. After dinner, everyone gathered around the fire to rest. Zoe sat next to Ryan, her big eyes rolling smoothly. Ryan was holding a map to study tomorrow's route. It seemed like he hadn't noticed the little guy with bad intentions next to him at all. Zoe quietly inched closer. "Closer! Closer!" She opened her mouth, revealing sharp little tiger teeth. "1 bite, just a small bite, absolutely not greedy." "Ah!" Zoe pounced on him. Just in the midst of this lightning and flint, Ryan didn't even turn his head. He made an extremely natural flip of his wrist, took out a yellow round thing from his space, and stuffed it into Zoe's mouth with great precision. Zoe bit down. The delicious liquid she had imagined didn't enter her mouth. Instead, a sourness that covered the sky and earth hit her. What she was biting was an unpeeled fresh lemon. Even for a zombie with a dull sense of taste, in the face of this pure physical acid attack, her defenses completely broke down. Zoe's little face instantly wrinkled into a bun. Her features were all crowded together, her eyebrows twisted, her lips puckered. Even those 2 high buns seemed to have wilted because of this sour taste. She whimpered and wanted to spit out the lemon, but her teeth had bitten too deeply just now, and she couldn't pull it out for a while. Ryan finally turned his head and looked at Zoe's funny expression. He couldn't hold back any longer. A low laugh escaped from his chest. "Still want a sneak attack? Today I'll give you a different taste to relieve your boredom. Supplement vitamin C, good for bone development." Zoe was so angry she stomped on the spot. "Bad guy, big liar. The fragrant bad guy is the worst." She turned around angrily, facing away from Ryan, and started hitting a stone next to her with her hammer. Dang, dang, dang! She vowed that even if she was hungry tonight, she would absolutely no longer pay attention to this bad man. After 5 minutes, Ryan took out a box of self-heating hot pot from his space and tore open the package. The rich aroma of spicy beef instantly wafted out. Zoe stopped what she was doing and slowly turned her head, her gray eyes fixed on the steaming little box. Her feet moved uncontrollably. She stiffly pulled out a flattering smile, pointed at the small hot pot, and patted her stomach again. The night wind under the viaduct carried a slight chill, but the fire beside it was full of laughable warmth. A night of peace. The morning sun shone on the abandoned viaduct, plating this steel jungle with a layer of gold. Next to the off-road vehicle, Cody was facing the rearview mirror, frantically spraying himself with a bottle of cheap cologne. A strong, pungent smell mixed with low-quality floral scent and industrial fragrance instantly filled the air. Brothers, even if tomorrow is the end of the world, today I want to be the most beautiful boy on the street. This was the first time she wanted to eat a person so badly because that person smelled so good. However, he had just finished speaking when he felt a creepy coolness coming from behind. Zoe was standing 2 meters behind him, her little face wearing the mask already igniting a murderous aura. For Zoe, the best smell in the world was the fragrance on Ryan's body. And this foolish apprentice had actually used an extremely pungent chemical weapon to pollute this pure air, seriously interfering with her radar. Roar! You're asking for it! Zoe raised her hammer and chased after Cody. Cody ran around the off-road vehicle screaming. Early in the morning and the energy is quite strong, Ryan yawned as he got out of the car. He looked at Cody being chased all over the place and shook his head helplessly. He took out a bottle of AD calcium milk from his space and inserted a straw. Zoe, come here and drink. Just hearing that, Zoe, who had been chasing her apprentice with a hammer a second ago, was already squatting obediently at Ryan's feet the next second, holding the AD calcium milk with both hands and sucking it up happily. Cody sat slumped on the ground, gasping for breath. Brother Ryan, you are my god. This voice-activated switch is too smart. Okay, get ready to go. Sam said there's an officially established Dawn base dozens of kilometers ahead. Let's go there to rest and exchange some supplies, by the way. The convoy set off again. The further south they went, the fewer abandoned vehicles there were on the road. Apparently it had been cleaned up by the base's search and rescue team. When the convoy drove onto a bridge crossing a river, it was forced to stop. The middle section of the bridge deck was seriously broken, forming a 10-meter wide gap. And on the edge of the gap, a yellow kindergarten school bus was hanging in mid-air. The front of the car was facing down, and most of the body had already poked out of the bridge deck. Below was the turbulent river. Help! The cries of children came from the carriage. And at the back of the school bus, a young female teacher wearing black-rimmed glasses, named Leah, was desperately holding onto the bumper at the rear of the car. Her hands had been worn raw, and her feet were barely holding onto the cracked ground. She gritted her teeth and tried to stop the school bus from sliding further down. Hold on, the teacher won't let go, Leah shouted. But her strength seemed like a drop in the bucket against the heavy school bus. What was even more shocking was that next to Leah, a mutant golden retriever, comparable in size to an adult calf, was also biting the tow rope of the school bus. Although this golden retriever had mutated, its eyes were clear. It must have been a pet dog before. Its 4 legs had created deep marks on the cement floor, and it let out painful sobs. Brother Ryan, it's a school bus. There's also a teacher and a mutant dog pulling it. Luke slammed on the brakes. Save them! Ryan pushed the door open and got out without the slightest hesitation. Cody and Sam also quickly grabbed their weapons and rushed up. But the school bus was too heavy. Even with a few people pulling together, they could only barely keep it from sliding, unable to pull it back up. Crack! The bridge deck made another crisp sound and the school bus sank sharply. The children in the car erupted in desperate screams. Brother Ryan, I can't hold it! Luke's veins bulged. At this critical moment, a heavy, rhythmic footstep came from behind. Everyone looked back and saw Zoe. She hadn't even brought her hammer. She pulled up her blue medical mask, covering most of her face. Then she rubbed her 2 little hands wearing half-black gloves and walked to the edge of the cliff with steps that seemed like a stiff robot. She glanced at the mutant golden retriever, which was so exhausted its tongue was hanging out, and patted the dog's head perfunctorily twice. Then she grabbed the thick tow rope. Zoe, don't force it. This thing weighs at least 10 tons. Ryan frowned. Although he knew she had a lot of strength, this was vertical hanging gravity. Zoe turned her head and looked at Ryan fixedly. Ryan immediately raised 2 fingers. A lifetime supply of canned meat. Hearing this, Zoe's eyes lit up. Meat for a lifetime. What kind of immortal promise was this? Roar! Zoe let out a choking roar. Her legs dropped into a horse stance. The cement bridge deck under her feet instantly shattered like a spider's web. Get up! Get up! Zoe's arms exerted force, and a terrifying muscle outline faintly appeared on her tiny arms. A miracle happened. The school bus, weighing more than 10 tons, was pulled up little by little. With one final effort, Zoe actually swung the entire school bus in a semicircle through the air. The school bus landed steadily on the solid bridge deck. Not even a single piece of paint was missing. The river breeze blew, leaving only the sound of everyone swallowing their saliva. Leah sat paralyzed on the ground, looking at the little girl in front of her, completely stunned. Which little Neja is this? Leah muttered to herself. The mutant golden retriever staggered over to Zoe, wagging its tail frantically. It even stretched out its big tongue and licked Zoe's hand flatteringly. In the animal world, the strong are respected. Obviously, this golden retriever had completely surrendered to this terrifying power. Zoe shook the dog off her hand in disgust. Then she ran to Ryan, stretched out her little hand, palm up. It meant a lifetime of canned meat, receipt. Ryan smiled and poked her hair. Don't worry, I, Ryan, always keep my word. Leah comforted the children, then brought them in front of Zoe. Thank you, little hero. If it weren't for you, we would all be done today. The children also followed the teacher's lead and shouted in milky voices, Thank you, big sister. A little kid with a runny nose took out a piece of chocolate from his pocket and carefully handed it to Zoe. Sister, eat candy. Zoe looked at the chocolate, then at the group of human cubs. She turned her head away in a tsundere manner, but her hand took the chocolate very honestly and put it in her pocket, wrapper and all. Human cubs were indeed the cutest life in the world, besides meat. Soon, under Leah's guidance, the convoy finally arrived at the Dawn base. It was a giant fortress transformed from a large steel mill. The towering city walls were full of heavy machinery, and searchlights flashed majestically even during the day. Listen up, once we enter the base, no matter what happens, Zoe must not take off her mask and hat, Ryan said seriously. Zoe's identity was too special. If the base's top management discovered she was a zombie, it would definitely cause unnecessary trouble. Zoe was dressed in this outfit, a pink sun hat on her head, a large medical mask on her face, and a pair of sunglasses contributed by Cody over her gray eyes. The whole person looked like an allergic child with a severe cold. Because they brought back a large amount of supplies and a cart of surviving children, the head of the base, General Smith, personally received them. Brother Ryan, you're young and promising. Your batch of materials has solved the urgent needs of our base. General Smith shook Ryan's hand repeatedly. General Smith, you're too kind. We just want a stable place to stay, Ryan replied, neither humble nor arrogant. No problem. I'll arrange the highest level villa area for you immediately. General Smith waved his hand. Just when everyone thought they could finally live a stable life for a few days, the harsh highest-level air defense siren suddenly went off over the entire base. The red alarm lights flashed wildly. A scout covered in dust stumbled into the command room. Report to the general, zombie tide! An extra-large zombie tide is pressing over from the north. The estimated number is over 100,000, and the leader is a 5th-level zombie king. What? General Smith's face changed dramatically. The 5th-level zombie king was currently the highest-level mutant zombie discovered by humans. They were not only infinitely powerful, but also terrifying. They already had a high level of wisdom and could mentally control low-level zombies to form an organized army. All members prepare for battle, guard the steel wall. General Smith pulled out his weapon and roared. Ryan's eyes flashed. A tide of 100,000 zombies and a 5th-level zombie king. This level of combat couldn't be avoided. Luke, protect your family. Cody, Sam, bring your weapons to the city wall. Ryan quickly gave the order. When everyone climbed the steel wall, which was over 20 meters high, even Ryan, who had been on the battlefield for a long time, was shocked by the scene in front of him. The roars of the zombies converged together, as if they were about to tear the world apart. And at the front of the zombie tide stood a giant zombie, over 5 meters tall, covered in bone armor. It even wore a crown twisted from abandoned traffic signs on its head. This was the 5th-level zombie king. Fire! General Smith gave the order. The heavy machine guns and mortars on the city wall opened fire instantly. The fire soared into the sky and zombies fell like wheat. But the number of zombies was too great. The front ones fell, and the ones behind climbed up over their companions' bodies. The 5th-level zombie king roared in anger. It grabbed an abandoned tank on the side and threw it toward the city wall like a shot put. Boom! A section of the city wall was shaken by the impact. Soldiers were thrown off. Heavy weapons are useless! Superpower team, go! General Smith shouted. The base's fire, water, and earth superpowers all used their abilities. The 5th-level zombie king laughed proudly, its voice as ugly as a bellows. It opened its mouth wide, ready to unleash its ultimate move, infrasonic mind control, to throw everyone on the city wall into chaos. At this critical moment, a clear and crisp roar suddenly came from the highest point of the city wall. This sound wasn't loud, but it strangely penetrated the noise of the battle and was clearly heard in everyone's ears. Everyone looked up. Zoe, wearing a pink sun hat, sunglasses, and a mask, was standing on the edge of the city wall at some point. In her hand, she was holding her iconic octagonal sledgehammer. Zoe was very unhappy, very unhappy. When the air defense alarm had sounded just now, she was about to eat the last piece of braised pork Susan had made for her. And then the noise had startled her, making her drop the braised pork right into the dirt. It was still covered in ashes. These were 3 unforgivable sins. The zombie king raised its head, its scarlet eyes looking at Zoe on the city wall. Suddenly, its eyes changed. As a 5th-level zombie king, it was keenly aware of the aura of the same kind on Zoe. And it was an aura that faintly suppressed its own. Surrender to me! Devour humanity with me! The zombie king let out a low brainwave roar, trying to control Zoe with the coercion of a superior. In the cognition of all zombies, the high level suppresses the low level. That was the iron law. However, Zoe's brainstem was missing. Her CPU simply couldn't process such complex surrender information. She received only one signal. This ugly monster not only disturbed her meal and made her drop her braised pork, but now it was also yelling at her. Zoe tore off her sunglasses and even tore off her mask. Those gray-white eyes without a trace of human emotion were completely exposed to the air. Zombie? She's also a zombie! The soldiers on the city wall gasped. The guns instantly turned and aimed at Zoe. Don't shoot, she's one of us! Ryan roared, blocking Zoe with his body. He knew that now he couldn't stop this runaway pure god of war. Zoe ignored the commotion behind her. She jumped directly from the 20-meter-high wall. Bang! Her petite body smashed into the zombie tide. Like a meteor falling into a colony of ants, it instantly emptied all zombies within a 10-meter radius. The Zombie King saw that this clueless little thing was ungrateful and let out an angry roar. It lifted its foot bigger than a water tank and prepared to trample her directly into meat. Zoe looked up at the stinky big foot. A hint of extreme disgust flashed in her gray eyes. It's so stinky. 10,000 times worse than mutant durian. She took a deep breath and held the handle of the octagonal hammer tightly with both hands. 80! 80! 80! Cody on the city wall watched this scene and couldn't help but excitedly match the sound effects of classic sketches. Zoe didn't dodge at all. She grabbed the octagonal hammer and, from the bottom up, aimed at the giant foot falling toward the Zombie King. She used all her strength and swung with a fierce hammer. This hammer brought together all the anger of the pure god of war who had lost her braised pork. Time seemed to stand still at this moment. With a loud crack, the Zombie King's indestructible bone armor shattered instantly like paper in front of the octagonal hammer. The enormous force was transmitted all the way up its calf. Roar! The fifth-level Zombie King let out an earth-shattering scream. Its huge body, 5 meters high and weighing several tons, was directly overturned by this hammer. Not only overturned, it flew up in midair. General Smith and the soldiers on the entire city wall dropped their jaws in unison. But that wasn't the end. Zoe, upholding the fine tradition of taking advantage of your illness to kill you, kicked the ground violently and shot up like a cannonball. She instantly caught up with the Zombie King that was still rolling in midair. She did a backflip in midair, grabbed the hammer with both hands, and landed a perfect smash on the Zombie King's head. A loud bang, louder than any previous one. The shockwave visible to the naked eye exploded in midair. The fifth-level Zombie King, this mobile fortress that had brought endless fear to humans, turned into a black meteor flying higher and higher. At the end of the sky, it flickered like a star, then completely disappeared into the clouds. What a nasty feeling. If the Zombie King could speak, it would definitely want to say this at this moment. With the disappearance of the Zombie King, the spiritual power that had controlled the tide of 100,000 zombies collapsed in an instant. The zombies, originally fierce and crazed, began to wander aimlessly and soon turned into a mess. The crisis was lifted. Zoe under the city wall landed steadily on the ground. She carried the octagonal hammer and patted the dust off her hands. She raised her head and suddenly realized that everyone was looking at her. Those gray-white eyes and sharp little tiger teeth all indicated her identity as a zombie. The soldiers on the city wall clenched their weapons tightly, the atmosphere extremely tense. Humans and zombies were natural enemies. That was the iron law of the past 3 years. General Smith's hand was on his weapon, his eyes complicated. Ryan clenched his space blade. If the base dared to act, he would definitely take Zoe and fight his way out. Luke's family and Cody also swallowed nervously, always ready for battle. Zoe was unaware of this tense atmosphere. She just felt hungry. She walked to the city wall and saw Ryan standing on it. She stretched out her little hand, pointed to her mouth, and pointed to Ryan. Roar! Don't forget the meat you owe me for the rest of my life. And I'm so tired just now, I want to bite you now. Looking at her heartless appearance that only knew how to eat, Ryan's tense nerves suddenly relaxed. He couldn't help but laugh out loud. He took out a top-quality air-dried beef strip thicker than her arm from his space and threw it directly from the 20-meter-high wall. Take your reward. Zoe cheered and accurately caught the beef strip. She squatted directly on the ground and gnawed on it, eating with a happy face. General, is this still a zombie? The adjutant next to him stammered. General Smith looked at the one below holding the beef strip, nibbling on it with relish, and even kicking a dead zombie out of the way because it was in the way. He silently put his weapon back. Of course she's a zombie. Which human have you seen become a meteor in the sky? Have you ever seen a zombie who doesn't eat people but only knows how to gnaw beef jerky? General Smith strode to the edge of the city wall and shouted below, Open the gates! Welcome our superheroes back to town! With the heavy roar, the steel gate of the Dawn base slowly opened. Teacher Leah led the kindergarten children and squeezed out of the crowd. Beautiful sister! The children pounced on Zoe without fear, chirping around her. The little boy with a runny nose who had given her chocolate was even bolder. He wiped the corners of Zoe's mouth with a tissue. My sister is amazing! Ha ha! General Smith's hearty laughter broke the brief silence. Come on, everyone, salute! Welcome our heroes back to the city! With one order, all the soldiers on and off the city wall stood upright and saluted a standard military salute to Zoe, Ryan, and the others. That night, The Dawn Base held a simple celebration banquet. Although materials were scarce, General Smith still brought out the best in the base. Several cases of canned military luncheon meat and dehydrated vegetable soup. Zoe was naturally the absolute center of this banquet. She was placed at a separate table with a mountain of canned luncheon meat in front of her. "Eat whatever you want. Enough today," General Smith said. Looking at Zoe, who was crazy about eating, General Smith turned his head to look at Ryan sitting next to him and lowered his voice. "Brother Ryan, I'm a rough man and won't beat around the bush. This little girl in your team is not simple." Ryan picked up the porcelain teapot in his hand and took a sip of boiled water, his eyes indifferent. "General Smith, what do you want to say?" "Don't worry, I don't mean anything else. It's been so long since the outbreak. I've seen all kinds of strange mutant creatures." General Smith sighed, his gaze turning deep. "As long as she doesn't hurt humans and she can help us fight zombies, then she's a comrade of humanity. But Brother Ryan, about this zombie virus, have you ever wondered how it came about?" Ryan put down the teapot, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Does General Smith know something?" General Smith looked around and made sure no one was paying attention, then leaned closer, his voice extremely low. "About 100 kilometers north of our base, there's an abandoned research institute built deep in the mountains. That was a top-secret biological experiment base established in the early days of the virus outbreak. As far as I know, before the virus broke out in full force, some kind of secret experiment was carried out there. There might be the most original information about the virus." "Have you sent anyone there?" Ryan asked directly. General Smith smiled bitterly, a trace of grief flashing in his eyes. "I did. A full 12 people, all battle-hardened veterans. As a result, the entire army was wiped out. Not even a distress message came back." Hearing this, Ryan's gaze instantly turned deeper. "Abandoned Research Institute? So I advise you, if you want to continue north, be sure to bypass that place." General Smith patted Ryan on the shoulder, his tone heavy. "There's definitely something more terrifying than the 5th-level zombie king hidden in there. Curiosity can kill people. Brother Ryan, now that you have this little girl, living in peace and stability is better than anything else." "Thank you for the reminder, General Smith. I'll be careful," Ryan agreed calmly on the surface. But inside, his mind was already churning. He hadn't planned to touch those unfathomable secrets so early, but now it was different. He had Zoe, an outlier who played cards completely out of common sense. She didn't eat people, didn't infect people, and retained human habits. And as time went on, her behavior became more and more logical. More importantly, Ryan remembered the wrist she had bitten. He hadn't turned into a zombie or awakened new abilities. It was just that every time he was exposed to the virus, he would have a fever for 2 days, and then his physique would evolve in extremely subtle ways. What was the connection hidden in this? Would there be an answer in that abandoned research institute? The night deepened, and the celebration banquet ended. Ryan stood on the balcony of the villa where he was arranged. The breeze blew, carrying a hint of coolness. "Brother Ryan, aren't you sleeping yet?" Cody had messy hair as he came over with a pack of potato chips, chewing loudly. "I'm thinking about tomorrow's route," Ryan said without looking back. "We'll leave the base early tomorrow morning." "So soon? Don't you want to stay a few more days? Although the food here isn't as good as our own cooking, it's so safe." Cody was a little puzzled. "Comfort can make people lose their vigilance, and we have more important things to do." Ryan's gaze looked north, deep and firm. "Get ready. By the way, keep an eye on Zoe. Don't let her eat all the food stored in other people's bases." Early the next morning, the convoy was sent off by General Smith, Leah, and the others, and slowly drove out of the Dawn base. Zoe sat in the bed of the car, holding a bunch of beef jerky sent by the base, reluctantly waving at the tearful human cubs. "Goodbye, beautiful sister. Be sure to eat more meat and grow taller." As the steel gates of the base closed behind them, the off-road vehicle drove on the deserted road again. On this day, the convoy drove along the winding mountain road. The surrounding vegetation grew denser and denser, and there was an inexplicable sense of oppression in the air. "Brother Ryan, the atmosphere here isn't right. It's a little scary. There's not even the sound of birds." Luke held the steering wheel tightly, his palms full of sweat. "Keep driving." Ryan calmly opened the map in his hand. Zoe suddenly stood up abruptly and grabbed the edge of the roof. Her gray eyes stared at the mountain forest ahead. She smelled a strange smell. It wasn't the smell of food, nor the sweet fishy smell of humans. It was an extremely complex scent that made her feel instinctively comfortable. She wanted to get closer, but there was also a kind of fear that made her hair stand on end. This contradictory feeling made Zoe extremely anxious. "Roar!" Zoe made a low warning sound in her throat. "Master, what's wrong with you? Are you not full? I still have a pack of spicy strips." Cody was about to show his hospitality, but was frightened by Zoe's cold stare and swallowed the spicy strips back. "Stop!" Ryan suddenly said. Luke braked. The off-road vehicle stopped steadily in front of an overgrown fork in the road. Looking along the fork, you could vaguely see halfway up the mountain a complex surrounded by tall walls and barbed wire. The facade of the building was mottled and covered with green vines. On a rusty iron plate above the gate, the words National Third Biological Research Center could be vaguely recognized. "Ryan, this place looks eerie, Like a ghost in a horror movie. Let's not go in, right? Luke swallowed, instinctively feeling uneasy. I'll go in and take a look. You guys wait for me in the car. No one is allowed to get out. Ryan pushed open the car door, his eyes locked on the research institute. Brother Ryan, I'll go with you. No matter what, I'm also a combat force, Cody shouted hurriedly. You stay to protect Luke and the others. What's inside isn't something you can handle. Ryan's tone was unquestionable. Roar! Zoe didn't agree anymore. She leaned half out of the car bed and waved the octagonal hammer in her hand, insisting on following to protect her meal ticket. The smell of that place was so strange, she couldn't let her meal ticket go on an adventure alone. You stay in the car. Watch your snacks. Ryan walked to the car bed, reached out and pressed Zoe's head back into the car. Then he took out some heavy weapons from his space and handed them to Luke and Cody. Lock the doors and drive away if you're in danger. Go to the service area ahead and wait for me. After saying that, Ryan walked toward the gloomy research institute without looking back. The iron door was locked with a heavy chain. Ryan sneered, and the space ability in his hand activated. An invisible blade flashed, and the heavy iron chain broke with a sound. Ryan pushed open the heavy door and walked in. A cold wind blew from the depths of the corridor, mixed with a strong, musty smell and a dry, fishy smell. The institute was silent, only Ryan's own footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. The ground was covered in a thick layer of dust, and the walls were covered with splatters of black stains and messy scratches. The corridors were lined with laboratories. The explosion-proof glass had been broken. Ryan moved forward cautiously, his mental strength highly concentrated, not letting go of any corner. He passed through a long walkway and a metal door that had been forcibly broken, finally reaching the core area of the institute, the central control room. Most of the equipment here had been smashed to pieces, and wires shorted out with a faint sizzling sound. But at the very front of the control room, a huge main control screen still lit up with a faint blue light. Ryan stepped forward and found that the screen was only playing a surveillance video. The quality was a bit blurry, and the time displayed in the upper right corner showed that this was 3 days before the zombie virus outbreak was in full swing. In the picture, a middle-aged researcher wearing a white coat with messy hair stood in front of a test bench. His eyes were frenzied and desperate. In his hand, he held a tube of liquid that emitted a dark blue light. There's no time. It's completely out of control. The researcher looked at the surveillance probe, his voice hoarse and trembling. We thought we had found God's code, but we didn't expect to open Pandora's box of hell. He took a deep breath, rolled up his sleeves, and injected the blue liquid into the vein of his arm without hesitation. After a while, he turned into a complete monster. It exuded a tyrannical aura, but when he looked up at the surveillance probe again, Ryan's heart suddenly contracted. His eyes were clear, not the gray-white of ordinary zombies, nor the scarlet full of killing desire like high-ranking zombies. Instead, they flashed with an extremely complex feeling, the light of human reason and painful struggle. The mutant zombie in the video seemed to want to speak, but his vocal cords had been destroyed, and he could only let out a beastly roar. He stumbled toward the reinforced glass wall of the control room, hitting the glass frantically. But every time he hit, he then hugged his head in pain, trying to restrain his killing instinct and stop himself from going out to hurt others. In the last 10 seconds of the video, he stopped impacting. He dragged his massive body step by step to the surveillance probe, pressed his distorted face close to the camera, and exhausted the last trace of human will. With a guttural voice so hoarse it didn't sound human, he spat out 3 words word by word. Undiluted, out of control, purified. Then, the picture turned to snow, and the video started looping again. Ryan stared at the screen, his breathing becoming a little rapid. Purified. He suddenly thought of his reaction every time he was bitten by Zoe. It reminded him of Zoe's unique habits. Could it be that, just as Ryan's brain was running rapidly, a piercing red siren suddenly blared at the highest level? The entire institute erupted in chaos. Warning! Warning! Unidentified biological sample detected escaping the quarantine area. Initiate highest level of defense. The cold, mechanical female voice echoed in the hallway. Boom. Accompanied by a violent mechanical friction sound, the titanium alloy gates in the central control room and all exits in the corridor, up to half a meter thick, lowered in an instant. Ryan's face changed dramatically. He turned around sharply, and a huge space blade slashed fiercely at the falling gate. Sparks flew everywhere. Although the space blade left a deep gully on the alloy gate, it couldn't completely cut through it. The gate fell to the ground with a bang. He was trapped. At the same time, at the off-road vehicle parked at the fork in the road outside the institute, Luke and the others also heard the piercing siren. They could even feel a slight vibration coming from the ground. Not good! Brother Ryan is in trouble! Luke's face turned pale, and he immediately tried to push the car door open. However, he found that the car door had been locked by Ryan's system. Find a way to open the car door. We have to save Brother Ryan. Cody was as anxious as an ant on a hot pot. The car windows were smashed frantically with a crowbar, but the bulletproof glass couldn't be broken at all. Just when they were at a loss, Zoe's originally clear and innocent gray eyes were instantly filled with unprecedented anxiety and unease. She could smell it. In that huge box that smelled strange, the most fragrant human who belonged to her was surrounded by an extremely dangerous aura. That fragrant person was in danger. Who would give her food after he was gone? Who would conjure braised pork for her? Who would let her secretly take a bite? Absolutely not. Roar! A fierce and violent roar, enough to shatter clouds and rocks, burst out of Zoe's petite body. This roar even drowned out the harsh siren of the Institute. Zoe raised her octagonal hammer high and smashed it down fiercely against the iron railing of the off-road vehicle's body. Master, that's a... Cody in the car was so frightened he hugged his head. Zoe couldn't hear what he was saying at all. She only knew that she had to get out. With another swing, the rear trunk of the whole car was directly smashed open. The sound of the iron sheet tearing was deafening. Zoe jumped down from the broken opening, her little leather boots leaving 2 shallow pits on the asphalt road. She dragged the huge octagonal hammer, the hammer head drawing a long spark on the ground, and rushed toward the Institute desperately. Inside the Institute, Ryan was trapped in a dead-end corridor outside the central control room. In front of him was a huge iron door torn apart by violence, and behind the iron door a figure appeared that made his pupils suddenly contract. It was the mutation researcher from the video. He had not been trapped in the lab, and after so long his size had skyrocketed. The muscles all over his body were like hard rocks and his nails shimmered like metal. This was much more powerful than all the zombies they had seen before, and the most terrifying thing was that when he saw Ryan, his eyes no longer flashed with a simple desire to kill, but a light of reason full of scrutiny and tyranny. He seemed to still retain some fighting instincts and human intellect. People... A slurred syllable came out of the mutant zombie's throat. With every step, the ground trembled. Ryan didn't flinch. His wrist flipped and 2 sharp space blades formed in his palms. Come on! Let me see what kind of monster you are! Ryan shouted coldly, and his body attacked like lightning. 2 invisible blades went straight for the mutant zombie's eyes. The mutant zombie actually let out a mocking snort. He didn't dodge. He suddenly raised his thick arm in front of him. Clang! The space blades slashed at his arm, leaving only 2 shallow white marks. The sound of metal clashing echoed. What hard bones! Ryan was secretly shocked. Before he could change his moves, the mutant zombie had already rushed over like a heavy tank. The speed was completely out of line with his large size. Ryan hurriedly rolled sideways. The mutant zombie's punch slammed into the titanium alloy wall, actually smashing a deep pit into it. The mutant zombie turned around, and his huge foot swept out with thunderous momentum. Ryan was midair and couldn't avoid it. He could only cross his arms to protect his chest. At the same time, he condensed a small space shield in front of him. However, the shield only lasted half a second before it shattered. The mutant zombie's kick landed firmly on Ryan's arms. A mountain of power poured in, and Ryan's whole body was sent flying like a kite with a broken string, crashing heavily into the alloy gate behind him. A mouthful of fresh blood sprayed out of Ryan's mouth, staining his collar red. His internal organs ached, and his arms hurt so much they lost consciousness. Ryan struggled to his knees, his eyes cold. The mutant zombie smelled the fresh blood, and the trace of reason in his eyes was instantly replaced by a crazy desire to kill. He took a greedy breath, opened his mouth wide, and pounced on Ryan. Ryan knew this blow couldn't be avoided. He took a deep breath, preparing for a final desperate fight. At this critical moment, boom! The titanium alloy gate that Ryan was leaning against suddenly made an overwhelmed scream. In the next second, a huge fist-shaped bulge rose in the center of the gate. Boom! Another earth-shattering loud noise. The alloy gate, which represented the highest defense technology of mankind, collapsed like a smashed cookie. In the smoke and dust, a petite figure appeared, with the momentum of destroying the heavens and the earth. Roar! You dare to touch my food? Zoe had completely gone berserk. She had rampage all the way. Whether it was explosion-proof glass, combination doors, or alloy gates, in the face of absolute violence, they all became jokes. Her gray eyes were now red. Looking at the behemoth that was about to attack Ryan, Zoe jumped high without hesitation. She lifted the octagonal sledgehammer, weighing 80 kilograms, above her head. This hammer had a sonic boom that tore through the air, smashing into the mutant zombie with great momentum. The mutant zombie felt a deadly threat coming from overhead. He looked up suddenly, and his eyes flashed with a hint of reason. When he clearly saw Zoe falling from the sky, his pupils contracted sharply. Time seemed to slow down at this moment. The mutant zombie didn't raise his hand to block or dodge. He looked at Zoe's gray-white eyes, pure and hot, without impurities. On that terrifying face, a hint of incredible shock miraculously appeared. Then, this shock turned into complete relief. Purified! He used his last bit of strength to utter a sound. Zoe didn't care about any of these complex mental activities. She only knew that this ugly big guy had hurt her favorite fragrant meal ticket, the one who could give her meat. Unforgivable! Smash them all! The octagonal hammer smashed firmly on the top of the mutant zombie's head. No suspense. With a muffled sound, the mutant zombie's head, harder than steel, instantly caved in under Zoe's angry blow. His huge body fell to the ground with a bang, splashing dust everywhere. From his broken body, a test tube containing a dark blue luminous liquid rolled out and stopped next to Zoe's little leather boots. Zoe didn't even look at it. She had never been interested in things she couldn't eat. She thought it was too dirty, so she lifted her little leather boots and stomped on it mercilessly. The crisp sound of glass shattering rang out. That tube, which might have caused the world to frantically compete for the virus stock solution, was trampled to pieces. The blue liquid quickly seeped into the cold concrete floor, turning into a faint blue light and completely disappearing. Zoe didn't care what priceless things she had just crushed. She threw away her sledgehammer and ran to Ryan, squatting down. She looked at Ryan's pale face and the blood at the corner of his mouth. Those empty gray eyes showed a rare emotion called distress. Ryan raised his hand and casually wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. "I'm fine." Ryan's voice was a little hoarse. He looked at Zoe with extremely complicated eyes. He wanted to ask her why she had come, and he wanted to ask her if she knew how dangerous it was. But he felt a bit funny asking these questions to a zombie. Zoe didn't care about that. Seeing that Ryan was fine, her eyes immediately shifted to the arm Ryan had used to block the attack. There was a long wound cut by the mutant zombie, and blood was dripping down his wrist. The sweet smell instantly penetrated Zoe's nose. She swallowed her saliva. This time she didn't hesitate at all. She didn't bother with her usual caution. She directly grabbed Ryan's injured wrist, lowered her head, and bit exactly on that wound. Ryan's body stiffened, and he subconsciously wanted to withdraw his hand. He could feel his blood draining rapidly. But at the same time, an extremely strange phenomenon occurred. With the loss of blood, a warm and strange warm current actually came from Zoe's mouth, feeding back into his body along his injury. Where this warm current passed, his internal organs, injured by the shock, began repairing quickly, as if they had been dry for a long time and encountered rain. His broken muscle fibers, exhausted by the battle, also felt like a dry spring gushing out clear water. He looked down and was shocked to find that the deep wound on his arm was healing at a rate visible to the naked eye. Not only that, there were no scars left. The reborn skin was even tougher than before. Ryan's breathing became rapid. He was greedy, but unconsciously, Zoe was feeding the purest energy back to him. The researcher's words in the video exploded in his mind again. Undiluted, out of control, purified. He finally understood. The reason he didn't have a fever every time he was infected, and the reason his physique had increased, wasn't because his own body was evolving at all. It was because his blood had long been fused with something that could fight viruses. But that wasn't the most critical point. The most important thing was the little one in front of him. She didn't eat people, didn't infect people, retained human habits, had terrifying powers, and could even feed back pure life energy when he was injured. She wasn't a failed viral infection at all. She was the ultimate goal of the experiments that all scientists dreamed of, but ended up losing control of. She was the first and only perfect purifier in the world, created by accident. Ryan looked at Zoe's messy hair and felt the surging power in his body. The corners of his mouth suddenly curled into an extremely relieved smile. "Zoe," Ryan didn't push her away. Instead, he gently rubbed her messy hair. "It's almost over. It's time for us to go home and eat." Hearing the word eat, Zoe immediately let go of her mouth. She licked her lips unsatisfied and raised her head, her little face stained with blood, laughing like a little fool who had gotten the whole world. "Roar! Go home! Eat big meat!" In this abandoned research institute, in this world where order had collapsed, one person and one zombie, facing the glimmer of light shining at the end of the corridor, walked out side by side.